Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the Dare County Board of Elections. Today is Tuesday, May 16th, and good to see everybody again. And if you'll, I'll call the meeting to order, and I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on our agenda is old business. Does anyone have anything that you'd like to bring up from prior meeting or anything that we were working on? No? Okay. All right, so we'll move on to new business. The first item is approval of the minutes. I'd like a motion for approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, the minutes are approved. The next item on our agenda is a payroll study for precinct officials. From an informational point of view, and Jackie, correct me if I'm off track a little bit on this, but from what I understand, we don't have a way of isolating payroll costs in an effort to increase the pay for our precinct officials. As you know, last meeting, we talked about increasing the same amount of Social Security, I believe it was, to cover that. I think we were talking about 7%. The county had already done a part-time employee payroll study, and we were not included. There was, I don't really know that I clearly understand that. Would you like to clarify that for me?
Yeah.
In terms of the state?
The payroll for our precinct officials is a little bit, it's not an ordinary situation because we have two sides to it. One is for the early voting precinct officials who are paid by the hour, and our election day precinct officials get a flat rate. So I think at the last meeting, Ken had mentioned that the county had just done a salary study, and there were several salaries that were, different job classifications that were revised, and there were salary adjustments made. And I spoke to the county manager, and he told me that the part-time employees, all the part-time employees that Dare County has, they were not included in that salary study. Therefore, there were no adjustments made to those salaries. He also advised me that if the board, in fact, wanted to increase the pay for the precinct officials, then you could do so, but you needed to be mindful as to making it work within the confines of the money that we have budgeted for that line item. So
I have a question about that.
Yes.
So we have to do it within the confines of what's budgeted for that line item for the current budget, but we could potentially increase the budget that we're requesting in future years?
Future years, yes, but the
Okay.
current budget has already been submitted.
Yeah.
The proposed budget has been submitted. The county commissioners are working on that, and I think that we're looking at approval for that sometime early next month. I don't know exactly what we got approved for. I just know what we submitted as a request. That doesn't necessarily mean that we will get what we requested, because they can, make adjustments, and we won't know what that final dollar amount will be until that budget has been approved. So in other words, the bottom line was that he advised me that the part-time employees, that includes all part-time employees employed by Dare County, were not included in that salary study, and therefore they did not get any type of adjustment. And so our part-time people would follow within that as well. So that was just, just to let the board know that if in fact you did want to increase the salary, you need to make sure that we keep it confined to the money that we have, and that would include the FICA and the Medicare. Medicaid,
FICA has.
FICA, it's all in one. Yeah, the taxes.
Now, and I have some questions about that, but I don't want to take that up right now since we'll be doing work on this, outside of our meetings with some work sessions with Mr. Buchanan and myself. Basically the discussions that we had about payroll for precinct workers last meeting indicated to me, and I think everybody would agree, the willingness of the board to take a look at how we can increase the pay that we pay our precinct officials for either or early voting as well as election day voting at the precincts. And so given that, I had a work session with Jackie and Kelly prior to our meeting, like I usually do, and we took that up and talked about this very thing. And it seems that the tool that we need to underpin all this would be a clear understanding by every member of this board as to who is paid what for each type of election, because our payroll costs are different depending on what the election is.
And that's only due to the payroll is calculated the same way, but the cost fluctuates based on the election, whether it be a municipal or primary and general. Primary and general usually kind of go hand in hand, but a municipal would be a little bit lower because we only have 6 precincts involved, and which requires less manpower.
Yeah, and to be clear for anyone who's watching, we have our municipal elections do not cover Hatteras Island because we have no incorporated towns down there. And then inland from here, Stumpy Point, Mans Harbor, East Lake, we're talking about the municipalities that have mayors, if you want to think about it that way, and elected councils or commissioners for each town. So that's why there's a difference. And when we get to the general elections and the midterms, we have candidates across the board, from president all the way to all of our, every precinct in our county, of which there are 16. So the costs are much more for that. And I would like to say that Mr. Ken Buchanan has graciously agreed to bring his professional bent to the study of our payroll, which will be a really big help. Kelly has already produced, she took a shot at a sample spreadsheet for us so that we could look at that and devise ways of using that as a tool where in the future we could do hypotheticals with an active spreadsheet in terms of if we chose to pay this much more or whatever it might be, we could do targeted raises where we think that we need to incentivize the folks who help us execute our elections. So that's basically what this is. This is the beginning, and I feel like, and I think most of you agree that we really need to have a solid footing if we're going to make any changes to what we pay the folks who work with us on our elections. So this will be a tool that will underpin all that, and we'll be getting to that in the near future. Does anyone have any other questions or anything you want to ask anyone? Yeah, Randy?
2 questions. First, on I remember reading that the county did a payroll study and made adjustments. Was there a fixed percentage across the board that they used, or was it based on classification?
It was based on classification,
Okay.
and they reclassified and did some with different job classifications. They combined some classifications and adjusted the pay grades and things of that nature based on their findings of the study.
Years
Okay.
of service.
Years of service took into play that as well.
Okay. The timing of this, assuming this activity moves forward for us, would affect the budget for the 2024 election?
It probably not, because that proposed budget is what we submitted. We did the 2024 and the 2025.
Okay.
Now, there is a time throughout the year where they do ask us to review those line items, and you could request different amounts at that time. But as it stands now, what we submitted as our proposed budget is what went to the county manager, finance office, and the commissioners for review.
Okay.
And they will take that proposed budget into consideration, and they will approve whatever amounts they saw fit for those line items.
Okay, so I was just trying to figure out which election or which group of precinct employees might be affected. So if we decided as a board to to recommend a change for the 2024 election as the first major election coming up, we would either need to get the commissioners to revise that portion of our budget.
No, you would need to make the budget, the money work within the confines of what you've been approved for. That's what
Okay.
I was advised by the county manager, is that whatever the board chooses to do, however you decide to do it, you need to make that work within the money that you have been allowed.
Okay. All right.
Who is deciding our overall budget? The county is deciding what we're gonna spend.
They decide what they give you to spend. The county
Yeah.
commissioners decide what they give you in your line items to spend.
But who decides on that? The town manager, the county manager is the one who
The county manager,
is the one.
my proposed budget is submitted to the county manager and the finance office, and then it goes to the Board of Commissioners for review and approval. And they can make changes to whatever is submitted as they see fit.
But then, to answer your question, we can change the 24-25 budget. After this next election, we can sit down and come up with a new proposal as to why.
You can request, doesn't mean you will get it.
I know, but.
And we have that was what I was trying to get at, is that we have the opportunity
Yes, yes,
to
yes.
request a modification if in fact we have agreed on some form of modification.
And that
of the
usually comes like midway into your budget cycle. It's not something that's done just to be done.
Okay.
And if I could interject here, to be clear, there's 2 years in the budget cycle,
Right.
and so different elections fall into that. So the spreadsheets that I submitted to Ken and Skip are actually a breakdown for each election to get as close to the dollar amount as I could on what we would spend on that particular election. So you can look at it in a 2-year budget cycle, like 24, 25, you're gonna have 3 elections pending any kind of second primary or some sort of special. And so that's a municipal, a primary, and a general. And this particular primary and general will be a presidential.
Yeah.
So the cost could increase slightly, not that much for a midterm, but potentially slightly. So if you look at the bottom dollar that I put, the total of what that potential cost is, then you look at what we've been given, then you can see what you have to play with. And the pay comes in as we're in these cycles. So the big thing is the action forms, the PAF. So it has to be approved that now you're going to go from $12 to $13 or $12.50. So action forms have to be done for all of those increases so that human resources and finance can get that money into the system and then into the actual checks for. So it's a little bit of a process. So just be mindful of a timeline there. If, in the event you do decide, okay, if we can pretty much safely say we're going to spend X amount of dollars on this election, which gives us this much, let's go ahead and give everyone an extra 50 cent or dollar, whatever percentage, however you choose to do it. And then the work begins on who you're going to increase and specifically so that we can do these action forms, because there is a action form done on each individual employee when it comes to any kind of pay increase or that type of thing. So also in the spreadsheets, I included the increase already that hasn't officially been done, but it's in there because I think that I wanted that to be put in for the site managers. So that's where you saw those columns, if you've looked at them, for that additional site manager pay is increased because I wanted that to be already put in since we had, brought that up as it being an issue.
Based on our last meeting?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, that's what it represents.
That $15 has not actually been paid to site managers to date, but the fact that their position and duties are more advanced than anyone else in the site, it just makes sense that that would be that would be something to consider. So I put it in so that you guys could see what the cost would be.
Mhm.
It just made sense to go ahead and put that in. So when you look at those 3 elections, you'll see that total number. And also includes my best estimation of overtime, and then also what it would cost to bring in precinct officials to do the sample audits that we do, the hand-eye counts, any kind of staff in the office, and then potentially the use of runners. Now that resolution has changed and we have to have supplies come in the night of the election instead of the next day, we're having to have them bring their supplies back from Duck, from Stumpy Point, from those areas. So, the potential need to have runners bring those thumb drives so that it decreases the time it takes for us to get our results in, I think is also a good way to utilize some of the funds that we have.
Okay.
I have a request, if my fellow board members agree. I would like to request that we have a public work session with you all in the future when there's an opportunity for us to present any sort of revised budget or new budget to the county commissioner, so that we can talk about it and have some input, before we look at the budget and before it goes to them. Do you think that's something that would be doable with staff, and do my fellow board members agree?
Is that something that you'd want to do before the budget is approved, the county budget is approved, or after?
I'm talking about in the
Upcoming
future.
election?
She's saying
I'm
in
talking
the
about in the
future.
future.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
If they come back to us, I think Kelly said midway through the budget cycle
right.
for adjustment, maybe we could have a public work session then. And then when it comes time for the next budget to be submitted, we could have a public work session so that we can really look at this and drill down a little
Yeah.
We
bit.
do that now.
But we don't.
We do the budget, and it's a public session, we go over all the stuff.
I'm talking about not in a meeting, not in an official
She's saying
board
a
meeting, but
separate,
a work session.
just like a
Yeah.
workshop, just for that.
Yeah.
It would
Right.
still be considered a board meeting, but it would be just
Right.
that particular item.
Right.
Yes.
I always said, I wasn't going to say we did this in Wake County, but we did do this in Wake County, and I found it very helpful to just have a separate work session on the budget so we can ask as many questions as we want, get clear on everything, no time limits, and then it'll help the board meeting, I think, run more smoothly.
Yeah.
And if the other members of the board would like to see the spreadsheets as well, because even if the numbers change or get adjusted, it does give some detail of what and why we pay what we pay. Because you guys see that one chunk of money, fiscal year 24 is 100,000, fiscal year 25 is 80,000, but it doesn't necessarily break down, who and why and which portions and the sites, how many estimated people, times how many days, times how many hours. It gets a little convoluted, and because it's not cut and dry. And so, it might not be the best because I'm not an accountant, but it does give you some idea. And I'll be more than happy to send that to the remaining board if you'd like.
And I think we'll be okay with the funds that are approved, whatever they may be, because the numbers that we submitted were a little bit higher based on, Kelly and I actually sit down and actually calculate what we think it's going to cost based on the number of workers and everything. And that's how we come up with the number for the proposed budget. And then we, add a little bit to it so that we're covered. So I think we'll be okay and be able to work within the confines of whatever we have approved.
Just keep in mind that first fiscal year, the one with the larger request amount, there is that potential for a second primary. And while we know that the county will look out for us in the event that we're under and we need to request more money, it's nice to have that cushion already built in so that it's not a hardship on the county to find, thousands of dollars. We've already got it
Yeah.
there. So we ask a little bit for that too. And that second primary is just, it's a guess really. We do the best we can, but even if we've got 10 or 15,000 there, that'll, make a big impact in the event that we have to have one, for salaries. Because you have to usually perform a whole election, even if it's for one contest, which means, early voting and all the sites running. So especially if it's, for instance, like a second primary for a presidential candidate, so it costs money.
Yeah, I like the direction that we're going with this, because we're going to clear out the things that undermine our credibility when we go to the county and propose a budget. And we're doing that in multiple ways with how we're approaching this. And I think the budget workshop is a really good thing. That's my personal opinion. And I hope the rest of the board feels the same way, that that's time well spent. And I've said this to you all before, that, I think this is the footing that we need to be on when we want to, propose an increase or whatever, especially with payroll, because that's probably the largest outlay that we have, and the most important, so, I commend everybody for taking this by the horns and moving forward. So I really appreciate that. Do any of you feel compelled to set a date for a budget workshop later in the year now, or do you want to wait till we have we've done our work together to create the spreadsheet and give you all something to look at, and then we can?
I think that would be most productive.
Okay, everybody okay with that?
Yeah, and maybe even wait till the county gives us a window
Yeah,
to say, okay, you can submit any adjustments or a new budget. or
yeah, so
whatever.
we'll, go with whatever your recommendation is on timing on that. So if you guys look for a good rhythm that we can get into with the county, with doing this work, give us some lead time to do it, then we'll go ahead and do that. Does anybody have any other questions about any of this? Okay, all right, so.
I would just, in response to Kelly, say that I would like to see the details, when you are at a point you think they're ready for prime time. So
Yes.
thank you.
I can send you what's done and then you can kind of see, what changes after, like, I think it'll give you a good idea, of what each election costs.
I think that'd be very
There's a
helpful.
little more detail in a spreadsheet than what
Like
you would
this
normally
says
have, but that's so
7:32, this says
you can
7:79.
see
And understand.
how we think
Yeah.
about things, because it is
That would be helpful.
time versus hours versus pay, depending
I
on
have to look
the
at that.
position and all that. And so we're normal financial spreadsheet would have all that detail. It's there for everybody to kind of be on the same page.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That only
I think
helps.
that would be fine. Whenever you think it's ready to
Okay.
circulate. I defer to Ken, who seems to be either rewriting it or writing it. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
All right, any other comments or questions?
Thank you.
I have a question pertaining to the voter ID equipment. Now, we already have that in place, is that correct?
The equipment's here.
Well-
Jackie, do you want to?
Yeah,
Talk
so
about
do
that.
you want me to go ahead and go into my director's?
Yeah, let's do it.
report?
Let's
Okay.
do
Let's
that.
do
So I
that.
sent you all the opinions from the Supreme Court of North Carolina on the felon rights and the photo ID and the redistricting. So regarding the felon rights, they just flipped the language back to what it used to be. And we are taking strides to implement that as far as putting that notice on any documents that we send out and making sure that, the public is aware of that language regarding registering to vote for felons. And it just changes that last sentence to say that, that they have not been convicted of a felony, or if so, that they have completed their sentence, and that includes any probation or post-release supervision or parole. So we're putting that on any voter registration cards that go out, because the language did change on that.
I think it also includes any fines.
No,
It doesn't?
that's the old language.
Oh, okay.
Well, it.
You know,
it
that they
used to-
haven't
It
paid.
used to say that, yes, but it would be, I guess, in reality, the fines would go along with any post-release supervision or parole. So
Mhm.
yes, it does, but it doesn't specifically say fines
Uh-huh.
in the language now. It
Right.
did before, but it doesn't now. But
Mhm.
that would be considered post-release and parole supervision, I would assume.
Mhm.
Regarding the photo ID, I have updated that and added the language on the website as a current status, and I put the language up to make everybody aware of that language. Regarding the issuance of the IDs, we are not currently doing that as of yet because we are still waiting on guidance from the state on implementation of that portion of it. We do have the equipment from before where we issued voter IDs in our office, but we cannot do that as of yet because since that implementation of the photo ID previously, the state switched to a new platform for our processing of everything in our office, which we were network-based, and now we are cloud-based, and they're not sure that the equipment that we have will conform to the cloud-based platform. So they're working on that aspect of it. So we're waiting on guidance on that. What we've been told is that they will provide guidance on implementation. They're also going to be doing some voter outreach and also some training for all 100 counties on the issuance of those photo IDs. So we're sitting ready, waiting for that guidance to come down from the state. And again, I have updated the language on the website. It's all out there for everybody to see. I tried to make it so that it kind of stood out. I put it in red, current status, photo ID, required for the municipal, so that, you know, we know that that's there. Regarding the redistricting, we've been told by general counsel at the state that the General Assembly may go back and redraw maps for the US House, NC House, and the NC Senate before the 2024 election. We don't have a timeline yet, but they're saying that it could be maybe in the fall prior to candidate filing. So we're still sitting ready, waiting for that as well. So keep you updated. As I get information, I'll provide it for you all. And,
Does filing still start in December sometime, the way it did before?
well, yes, filing is usually the first week. I think it's usually like the first week or the second week in December for the primary. And that would be for, you know, your local county seats, your, you know, state seats, your judicial, all those types of contests. And then we've got candidate filing coming up for the municipal election in July. And so we're in the process of preparing things and getting ready for that as well. I provided you all copies of the year-to-date budgets, which I had them for the last meeting, but we haven't had a meeting in 2 months. So I have that there for you to look at. If you have any questions, feel free to call me and we can talk about it. That's about all I have. Y'all have any questions about anything?
I noted there was a mention of a requirement for maintaining a database.
They speak of maintaining a database. They're just speaking of our everyday SEAMS applications, which is the state database where we maintain all of our voter registrations. Everything is maintained in that state database. That's what they're referring to when they say that.
Thank you.
Two things quickly. Thank you for the year-to-date report on the budget. Appreciate it very much. On the question of including language on fines, the state, I guess maybe this gets kicked back to the state. In some states that have gone through this same process of rejiggering when a felon is not a felon or when eligible to vote, fines have become an issue because it was not made clear in the descriptive language in some states that fines were part of the post-conviction redress. And if that's the case in North Carolina, then I would think we and the other 99 counties would want to make sure that that's included. And now I'm not suggesting that that's a decision that we make or you make, but I would encourage taking that back to the state folks who are trying to deal with guidance, because it could become a problem either at the voting place or later on if a vote is challenged for that reason. And if people haven't been given notice,
Well,
that's kind of unfair.
the
I think.
language, I mean, this came down from the Supreme Court. So, you know, our hands are tied on that. And all we have is the language that we've been provided. And that's exactly what it says. So that's all I can put out there. And like we were just having a discussion, I would assume that anyone that was convicted of a felon and they were on probation or parole and they have fines or restitution to pay, it would be included in that supervision that they were on. That would be a condition of their supervision. So that's the language, what we have. That's all I have.
But if it's not, I don't know that we can police that. And I think
Yeah.
it was addressed in the huddle, one of our huddles, and they said that's why they just go with the language of being released. And so if you've been released, regardless of what the terms are, it's not for us. As long as they've been released, then they're in compliance.
And it's said on that, the information I provided, it says this means if a person is on probation, post-release supervision, or parole for a felony conviction, they must complete that portion of their sentence in addition to any prison time before being eligible to register to vote. So it's their responsibility to know what the terms and conditions of their probation and parole is. I mean, if they have fines and restitution that are included in those terms, then it all falls in that together. And we can't police that.
The court also ruled that it is constitutional for a period of supervision to be extended due to a person's failure to completion the final terms of their sentences. So I think that's what happened was they've gone back and forth with the language, whether or not they thought it was constitutional, so they left it out.
Right, because the prior language did address restitution and fines,
Mhm.
but they didn't go back to the prior language. They introduced this new language instead because they found that the financial terms was unconstitutional. So there's a fine line there. And
Well, I think
mean,
the state board has general counsel and the attorney general, and they'll all talk about,
well, that's where this
Yeah.
came from, was the general counsel.
okay, but are they gonna follow it up with additional guidance, do you know, or?
I do not know, because this is what came from, this is what we were provided
Mm,
as information that the Supreme Court decided upon.
Okay, follow-up question then.
Mhm.
Regarding individuals who might fall into this category, felon post-release, the state will be providing data on who those individuals are so they can be identified if they try to register.
No, sir, we don't send any type of identification to the precincts for identification of felons. It is the felon's responsibility to know what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do, because they sign that registration form. And if they sign that registration form, they're committing a crime, and they should know that. It's not up to us to do that. We had an instance a few years back where a gentleman came into the early voting site and he started to, well, actually, he did complete a voter registration form, and he was a convicted felon.
Mhm.
Okay, so once he figured out that he was not supposed to register, he wanted to rescind his application, because there are
penalties.
there's consequences for a felon when they do that. So we can't send a list or anything to any of the voting sites and say, hey, here's a list of convicted felons. If these people come in, you're not to register them. We can't do that.
Now, that being said, for those that we already currently have registered, there are reports
Right.
that I run. And I think that they try to get all of them. And so it's a felony, there's 3 separate reports, felony, estate, and then like a federal that goes through the Secretary of State, and like the Attorney General's office for people that are residents of North Carolina, registered in Dare County, but have committed a federal crime, whether it be in another state or whatever. And so when I get those, I go through a list maintenance process. They are sent a certified letter that lets them know that we've been made aware that they are a felon who is in the position that they can't be registered, whether it be incarcerated or on some sort of parole, active felon. And then they have a certain amount of time to appeal. And then within 30 days, they are to be removed due to felony conviction. So that is a list maintenance process that we go through to try to keep our current records. So although we don't have any way to flag them at the polls, we try to keep our records current based off of those reports.
Okay, and the court decision does not impact doing that list processing that,
It does, so it changes the field of who, so while prior to the court decision, they were only sending me names of those who were incarcerated, now the group is expanded to
Okay.
those who are on active parole or probation.
And it just flipped because it was that way before.
Mhm.
And since they've changed it, they've gone back. So we've gone back
okay,
to the old process. It's just, yeah.
And then it gives them time to say, well, you've got that, this isn't me, or this is incorrect, or I've completed. They have time to appeal that
okay.
decision to remove them.
So I understand the universe of potential people has expanded, but the process that you use and other counties presumably will remain the same in terms of trying to anticipate
Right.
problems of
Just change
pretty much,
registration.
yeah.
Okay.
And what happens usually is, like, for example, a felon goes in to register to vote or goes in to vote, and the poll worker looks them up in the system and they can see that so-and-so is not in the system. Well, they'll call us. We're able to see on the back end exactly what's going on with that individual. And we can tell them, hey, that person was a convicted felon. If they've completed yada, 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 then they can register. So they can discreetly ask them, hey, they've got you flagged as a convicted felon. And if you've completed your probation and parole, then your citizenship has been restored and you're able to re-register.
And that's
And-
automatic, but I also run a report for felony convictions
Completed sentence.
So I try to keep that updated as well, so that it doesn't re-register them. They still have to re-register, but it changes their status in our system
Mhm.
so that, if that's the case, they don't even have to bring that up to the voter.
They can just,
I can just
do it.
say, they're fine, they're not registered. They need to either re-register if it's early voting or do a provisional if it's election day, something like that. So, but the precinct official should not approach a person with that, aren't you a convicted felon
Yeah.
kind of thing. They should never do that
Mhm.
based on assumption or something they know or think they know.
yeah, and that falls in the same category of a person coming in and that they've had a relative that's deceased. You don't go up to them and say, hey, I heard that so-and-so passed away. Here, you want to fill out this form so you can have them removed. That is a no-no. You can't do that.
And Kelly, I assume that it would be too burdensome for when you run that report and it shows that they've completed everything. It would be too burdensome for you to send them a letter and say you're eligible to re-register, or would it?
Well, yes, it would be, because 9 times out of 10, they're not at that same address. So if she were to send them a letter, it's going to come back because they will probably more than likely have been in inactive status prior to being removed or whatever, and the letter is going to come back. So it would be,
Okay.
Yeah, I think the
Good
states probably would have added that in part of the process, but they probably found the same thing, the people had potentially been incarcerated for a certain amount of years or
Mhm.
whatever. So we really don't even know where they live, if they're
That
still
makes
in the
sense.
county.
Right, because some of the lists
That
that,
makes
that we
sense.
get with the names on them, the address that's shown on that felony list is different than the address that we have in our voter registration database. So that would be a little,
I got you.
okay.
I got you. Okay.
It sounds like some of these might wind up being provisional ballots, just because of, let's say, confusion on the part of the voter and no way of completely clearing it up at the time.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, if a voter knows, in fact, that they were a convicted felon and they are currently released from probation and parole, they automatically know, they know, usually know their status. So they could go in during the early voting site and register just like, anybody else and vote a regular ballot. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to do a provisional.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions?
I just have one more thing on the director's report. Didn't I receive something about an upcoming training that's going to be in person? And can
I
you tell
sent
us any
you
more about
information
that?
on the conference that's going to be held in August.
Yes.
And I sent that to y'all because we have board appointments coming up in June,
Right.
and I don't know what the status of our board will be. We hope it's going to be the same, but you never know.
Right.
So I sent you all that information regarding that conference because I can't justify signing you all up for a conference if I don't know you're going to still be
Until we've
seated
been
in your chair.
reappointed. Sure. Can you just remind us of what those dates are, or do you have them handy?
I don't have it with me.
Okay.
I think it's the
14th and 15th of
14th, right.
August, registration at the
Okay.
hotel, I think, is
And
on the
that is,
13th.
that is in Concord, is that right?
Concord near Charlotte.
Okay.
Yes.
And this time it's going to be in person, so we're
Yes, so-
expected to go.
You could go ahead and make a reservation for a hotel if you wanted to, just so that you'll have a place to stay, because you can always cancel it. And I still have time to register you. I have until July something to register for the conference.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did the information you sent list the hotel where the meeting
It
will
gives
be?
you a link to everything.
All right. I don't
You
think I
have to
read that
register to
far.
Get the link.
No. Because the link is to the hotel and then the registration is separate because the registration is through NC State. And I can still do that up until, they gave me a deadline of July, maybe the 15th or something. And I can still get the discounted rate to do the registration for the actual conference. But as far as your hotel, I would recommend, if you think you would want to go ahead and reserve a space.
And then we could get reimbursed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
think- and-
You would submit your hotel receipts to me and you could get reimbursed. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think, just so our newest board member will know, I think it's a requirement that we attend.
Well, you don't have to go to this one. You could go to the next one.
Okay.
It's not required. It's just required that you attend
Attend
within
one.
within
Within
the
the first
first year of your appointment.
But we don't know when or where the next one will be.
No, we don't.
Okay.
And if I were to guess, it would be closer
To us.
to us than Charlotte. Because Charlotte and Hickory are our furthest ones. And Hickory is far.
Yeah, it is.
I guess it's just a question of, would you rather have the information earlier rather than later, even if it's farther to go?
Yeah.
I mean, for me personally, I'd probably rather have the information sooner
Yeah, same here.
rather than later.
And they did provide an agenda too, so you could look at that
Okay.
and see, sometimes it's pertinent information, sometimes it's not.
All right. Any other questions or comments? I don't really have anything else. This is a good meeting. It was good to see everybody again. And Jackie and Kelly, thanks for, your work to clarify things for this board. We really appreciate that.
Does that finish your report?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Okay. I didn't want the chair to just say.
Yeah, I'm done. I just, was answering you all's questions. I'm good.
Okay. All right. So there's no other business? All right, seeing that there's no other business,
Next meeting.
the next meeting is June 20th at 10 a.m. right here. We expect to see everybody. So, all right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So do I.